Welcome back to Troubleshooting Agile. Hi there, Jeffrey.
Hi, Squirrel. Squirrel, you gave me a beautiful image that I wanted to explore on the podcast. And it was sort of, I have in mind a classic Western scene. It's high noon, and the two gunslingers come out. Although in this case, I guess they're word slingers. And what we have are two LLMs facing off. So I love this image. So tell me, why is it we having dueling LLMs at high noon?
Well, I don't know why we're having them, but I can certainly tell you we do. And I thought we'd put it to our listeners and maybe give them some ideas for dealing with it. So I've got several clients who have found sort of a tremendous revelation. And their revelation is that when they would previously have written a document, like they would have written a product specification, or they would have written a requirements document, or a user interview, user research guide, or something like that, or an onboarding document, that an LLM can write it for them. And they've sort of taken this to the extreme. So that, in fact, what I've observed happening is that someone will write such a document, say a product specification of some variety for an engineering team, and then the engineering team will have Claude summarize it for them. And then the team will have Claude write the code, and then the Claude will come up with the testing plan, and then Claude will have the discussion about whether it's a useful feature with somebody in a chat and record that. And nobody's actually talking to each other. And given we wrote a book about Agile Conversations, I thought maybe that might be an anti-pattern. What do you think?
Okay, all right. I can see that. If no one's actually talking to each other, the first version I had was sort of like I was kind of thought this is the fulfillment of something I predicted a couple months ago when I heard about people rolling out, and they were excited about how they'd gotten LLMs to write some internal documentation, on project status. And I thought, well, that's just great because this is going to go to an LLM that's going to summarize the project status, and we'll have a place where no one's actually reading anything. What you actually described sounds even a little bit better, right? Which is, here we have all these steps. I guess maybe the question I'd say is, well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what's wrong with it.
Okay.
It's that no one's actually having a dialogue about what the software should do. And I think one of our major points when we wrote Agile Conversations, maybe you've changed your mind, Jeffrey, so that would be really interesting to me and our listeners. But I thought we wanted more high bandwidth communication among humans who understood, say, what the human purpose was of their software. And what I'm seeing at clients who are doing this is the death of conversation. So they're just kind of sending summaries back and forth at each other, and having AI note takers write down a whole bunch of summaries, but there's no actual joint thinking. Nobody's at a whiteboard. Nobody's arguing and having a productive conflict.
Right. Okay. Now that makes sense to me. I think I want to go back to our book. Yes, we thought people should be having these conversations, but in a sense, the goal wasn't the conversations, right? It was the joint understanding. It was they were mechanisms. They were instrumental toward getting what people really wanted, which is how do we tap into all the knowledge and all the different points of view that we have within the team. But I guess if your team has no points of view, if people don't know anything, then there's no conversation to have. Maybe this is more efficient, And I'm saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm also realized that a lot of people didn't read the book or read the book and thought, well, that's fun, but then didn't really embrace the idea of productive conflict, and instead were writing memos that wouldn't get read or writing summaries. And at least when you describe this, it sounds like there's some amount of closing the loop, which maybe that's an improvement over where they would be otherwise. I mean, it's definitely not as good as having a team working at a whiteboard. Oh my God, a whiteboards! I miss whiteboards so much. And building a shared image of what they want to create. But I guess versus the median company, I just struggle a little bit to see how this is actually worse than what they were doing. It's not necessarily better, but maybe it's not actually worse. Tell me more about what you're seeing in practice.
Well, the difficulty is that I aspire to much more than the median, and I charge fees that reflect that. So if I were to go to my clients and say, yeah, you'll be just a little bit better than the median, I don't think I'd be a very successful consultant, nor should I be. So, what I'd
That's
really
true.
like is to get people collaborating at whiteboards, whether they're virtual or real. I'd like to have real productive conflict among different users of the software who really want something. And I saw that, by the way, with my client that I went to see recently, where there's really competing demands from different countries, from different constituencies, from different groups within the company, and there's a productive conflict about where to put the resources. That's useful. You can't do that with LLMs, or at least I haven't seen a way to do that effectively that's better than median, that involves Claude arguing with ChatGPT. It just doesn't seem to happen. Whereas humans can make a passionate argument, as I heard last week, about why this country needs this particular attention from developers more than this other country, and there are differences among the countries in which the company operates, just to take a very simple example.
Yeah, well, I really like that. And I'll say so. Like, if you have the case where people have the prerequisites to have that conversation, and think about what's required. First of all, someone needs to have the knowledge about what's needed, and they need to have conviction, and they need to have the sense of safety, psychological safety, that they think it's important to bring that up. They value sharing their point of view more than group harmony, or rather they think they're serving ultimate group harmony by bringing up different differences of opinion. So you have those strong prerequisites, and in that case, then by it would be certainly a mistake to say, like, okay, LLM, go draft that for me instead, and get sort of some watered down element. I'm I'm in a contrarian point of view today. I when I think about where I often see this fall short, and often it's a case I think I've been in many meetings that are poorly facilitated, where someone will state a point of view, but they're not at the point of disagreeing passionately. So I'm gonna just take that little bit of psychological safety out, and maybe they raise it, and they raise it in a kind of a passive way. Well, don't you think we really should think about focusing on these other countries? And someone says, no, no, we have these other things to do, and they're like, oh, okay. But there's never really any work done to really flesh out the options, flesh out the alternatives. What are the trade-offs? This is something I would try to drill into people. Always be talking about the trade-offs between options.
And of course, LLMs are not terribly good at creating that passion, at creating that conflict. They're trained to be sycophants, right? They're trained to be telling you that your ideas are the greatest ever, and to support you and help you. And what I'd much rather is have LLMs or people or both who are challenging me, who are giving me new ideas.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that I think that there is an element here where I think LLMs can play a role in helping to draw some of these things out. They are sycophantic to the user, and they try to do what the user wants. But one of the things you can do is, I think you can use LLMs to mine for conflict. And this is going to be a bit of theory on my part, as far as in a workplace. But in my own personal use, where I'm doing things like creating training plans for myself, I will have the LLMs debate options and trade-offs. I will have it create my quote unquote council of experts, and have even teams of experts create two different plans, and then have them debate. And since the LLM knows that I want to debate and I want to see options and trade-offs, it generates those for me. I actually think that LLMs can do a good job in helping the median company better surface the different points of view, because it can pick up on those sort of passively stated things and say, what were all the points of view that were said in this transcript, however weakly? What are the things that have said we are not doing, and did we specify the trade-offs? I'm excited about bringing LLMs into meetings as a way of saying, are we following our policies and processes on what a good conversation looks like? In the same way that I think there's some advantages in LLMs in development, as a way of saying, are we following the process, and being, kind of reminding people about what we said our process was supposed to be. I'm curious if that sounds more acceptable to you, and how does it differ from what you're seeing in practice?
Well, it differs completely from what I'm seeing in practice, in the same way that I haven't seen anybody driving like a Formula One driver on the motorway. most people get in their cars and kind of drive along, and they try not to hit stuff. And the media and company is not creating councils of experts out of its LLM subscriptions. The most they might be doing is token maxing, right, and asking people
Yeah.
to use more LLMs, but they're using them out of the box. They're not prompting them in the way that you are, which I think would be extremely helpful. You know what it reminds me of, Jeffrey, is do you know about the Tenerife air disaster?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is the one where there was one plane taking off while the other one was landing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. The main thing that happened was a terrible, terrible tragedy where two planes collided on the runway. But the thing many people don't know is there was a navigator or an engineer, I think it was an engineer, on the flight deck who wasn't in charge of actually hitting the accelerator, which of course killed people 7 seconds later. And that engineer said, and you can hear it on the voice recording, I think that other plane might still be on the runway. And the captain says, oh no, they left. It's fine. And that's exactly the kind of shutting down that I think the media and company has, is you
Yes.
surface a little bit of conflict. Somebody actually has the psychological safety in airplanes. It's called, in airplane cockpits, it's called crew resource management. It actually came out of the Tenerife disaster. And that somebody summons the courage to say, hey, we should think about this possible problem. And somebody else says, don't worry, it's fine.
Yeah.
I see far too many LLMs and automatic note takers and other things having a sort of persistently cheerful view, when I would much rather I had Eeyore in the cockpit saying, I think it's going to rain. I don't think that today's a good day. I think we're probably going to be in trouble. What do you think?
I think that makes perfect sense. And I like the way the conversation has gone, because what I would say is, if you just see LLMs writing documents to be consumed by LLMs, to be responded by and summarized by LLMs that will be then collated, the summaries collated by LLMs, the question I want to ask is, where is the potential to discover conflict? What in our communication are going to bring up different points of view? And there's where is the learning going to happen? Maybe is the most succinct way to put it, with the idea that learning is the detection and correction of error. So I think, as you say, like the LLMs will have a bias towards happy, friendly type communication, and I think it's a very good thing to challenge people and say, well, where in this flow are we going to discover mistakes? Where can we learn? And how can we inject it so we have the potential for learning at every step? That to me seems like a very good way. And then the question can be like, can the LLMs be part of it? How can the LLMs improve our ability to learn, rather than just displacing our ability to learn? And because I think that it's definitely true that for a lot of companies, they're just adopting this and aren't really thinking about this issue of the value of disagreement, because of course they weren't thinking about it before, because it wasn't like they were having great conversations that they've displaced with these LLMs. Because if they did, the people who are missing those conversations would be, pounding on their desks and say, look, this is not working. We've lost too much. Give us our whiteboards back. I'm assuming that the cases where this is happening is generally the case where things were kind of ho hum anyway. And in that case, having it be out of LLMs isn't that much of a loss. But for your role, yeah, I definitely don't think you should let them get away with that. Totally agree there. How does that sound to you?
It sounds great, and I do like the idea of prompting your LLM, giving it a system prompt, or in another way, making it more Eeyore-like, more like that engineer in the cockpit, willing to challenge and willing to find difficulties. I think if our listeners were to prompt their LLMs in that way across the board, across their company, and then take the opportunity in the summary, maybe it should book the meeting, right? So get a room with a whiteboard, make sure everybody's actually in the office, and point out that point 3 in the weekly meeting led to a vigorous debate that we should continue later, and then book it in the calendar and make sure that there's a whiteboard in the room. That would work for me. If I saw clients doing that, I'd be very happy. I'm sad to say I don't see clients doing that at all.
I can offer you one glimmer of light. I know someone, I was talking to them this past week, and they said they had developed a worry bot. which was something that would go
Hmm.
over the transcripts to detect the places where people said, I'm worried about this or I'm worried about that, and to say, like, did we do anything about it? Collect all the worries from the
Yes.
meetings that were voiced so that we can say, did we ever actually address it or did we just move on silently? That's not a complete solution, but I think it is an example of how people who are creative and are actually looking how to get something good out of them. This is our friend Misha, by the way,
Oh,
can
fantastic. Yeah, please ask Misha to publish that so our listeners can get it. We'd love to refer them to whether this week or another week. If Misha's listening to us, please share your worry bot. We need a lot more worry bots in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the kind of thing that the people can look for. And I like it too because that's a very custom thing. Like, what do we think is a problem? Well, we think sometimes we have this place where we bring up worries and don't address them. Great, let's go ahead and get the bots to help us solve that problem. So there you go. There's some idea that maybe can be inspiring for some of your clients.
Excellent. And of course, for all of our listeners. So, listeners, if you're named Misha, please publish this worry bot. If you're not named Misha, consider going out and creating one or a similar sort of prompt or tool that helps you use these wonderful new abilities we have to actually create better conversations instead of what I see far too often. It's very depressing. People eliminating conversations and eliminating understanding and opportunities for learning. Of course, if you want some help with that and you want to ask us about it, or you have some ideas, or you've written your own worry bot, or if you disagree and you think actually LLMs writing to other LLMs is the way of the future, I know there are some people advocating that. We like to hear it when people disagree, when they agree, when they have questions. And the best way to get in touch with us for all of those is at agileconversations.com. And that's where you'll find our book, Agile Conversations. We talked about that, as well as free material that's related to it, like how to hold a conversational dojo and videos and writings and all kinds of other fun stuff. So head on over there. You'll find email and Twitter and lots of different ways to get in touch with us, which we really welcome. Of course, the other way to stay in touch is to come back again next week when we'll have another edition of Troubleshooting Agile. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Squirrel.